I want to take you back prior to 2007.
Right, yeah.
What were you doing prior to 2007?
I worked in IT for about 15 years for British Aerospace, and I worked on projects like the astute nuclear submarine and in-flight entertainment systems on aeroplanes, doing the IT for bits and pieces like that. But I was always dreaming about painting right from the very beginning. I've got a distinct memory of me sitting in a room full of servers, all banked up, and thinking about painting. I'm not thinking about computers at all, thinking about painting and trying to find other people in the offices that also were interested in painting so we could kind of match up and talk about it. So there was this kind of strange desire to create. And there was no sort of ambition at all, and no desire for money or anything. It was the love of painting. And I'd get home, and I would I think I've probably had a couple of failed relationships because of this. But I would get home, have my tea, and want to spend the evening painting, and that's like the thing that I used to love is.
And what mediums were you interested in during that time?
Well, I started in oil paints, and I was trained in oil paints, and I was an apprentice to a landscape teacher called Chris Baker, who lives in West Sussex, and he is an excellent painter and an even better teacher, and he owns a cowshed of a barn. It's in the middle of a field. There's this great big cowshed, and it was so inspiring. I used to go in there at the weekends and just clean all his paint and tidy up and sweep and do all the menial things. It's kind of like paying your dues, you're working your way up there. And then he would sit down with me with a coffee and a croissant, and we would talk about painting, and he would get me to do sort of quite obscure things like just getting a panel and painting it different shades of grey and different shapes, not looking at form at all, and seeing how they move backwards and forwards and how the shapes related to each other. So I'd spend a lot of time doing that, and that really sort of got loads of ideas in my head. And then I moved on to, I decided I wanted a studio of my own. So I had a look around, I'd see if I could find somewhere. There was a big stately home near where I lived, and they had some spare rooms going. But the only one I could afford was quite a small room, about the size of this room, but it was the old ladies' toilets. So it was all tiled floors, and the cubicles had been taken out, thank goodness for that, but it was still the ladies' toilets. So I set that up as my studio, and it was lovely. I used to drive to this stately home every day, and it would be an open studio, so anyone visiting the stately home could come in and have a look at my paintings. And while I was doing that, I moved to charcoal. I moved away from oil. Right at the very beginning, when I started painting, my teacher said that I wasn't a colourist. I didn't have a very good eye for colour. He said I'm a tonal person. So I moved naturally from colour to black and white with charcoals, and mucked around with charcoals for quite a while. And then after that, I think I was on the internet and I saw a picture, I can't remember who by, I wish I knew who it was, of a Holger shot of some trees in the lake. And I thought that was absolutely fantastic. It was really dreamy, just like a classic Holger shot. Yeah. But I hadn't seen anything like that before. And also at the same time, I bought a copy of Black and White magazine, and they had a Polaroid Type 55 print of a plant. I can't remember the chap's name, Irish chap, but it was fantastic. And so that got me, this photography thing looks really good. So I bought myself a Holger and took a few shots of medium format film and developed it myself. And it's one of those things where you look at it and you think, this is brilliant. I can get this wonderful gut feeling of happiness looking at making these things. And then the painting and charcoal stopped and the photography took over.
Were they black and white, the Holger?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I've never done any... I don't know how to develop anything in colour. I'm sure it's quite a tricky process. So, nice and simple for me. And, it sort of started from there.
It's really strange because I've gone the other way to you. I've started doing charcoal
stuff. Well,
yeah.
Yeah, I think the two, painting and any kind of other art, I think they can be meshed, and you can flit from one to the other. And I think it's a real shame that they are separated.
And of course you use that technique that you learnt with because your pencil and line drawings have you used to evolve to make the island pictures that you the photographs that you make. And so that element, there's that strand all the way through your work then.
There is, and there's something to do with drawing. I find that it's when you're drawing something, you have to look at it. If I was drawing that cup, for example, I'd have to look at it, and then if you're actually going to draw it properly, you'd have to look at it again and again to get the tones, and you have to really channel your vision. And I find that is something that sort of overlaps with photography as well, for me.
Does any of your IT life have any relevance to what you do?
Only the advantages I've got of knowing how to use computers and Lightroom, but I think that's most people can get the hang of that. But all the heavy stuff that I was doing with IT, no, not really at all. It's no.
And so 2007, you start. It's really strange. Poppit is a kind of weird place for me because my cousins of mine lived in Cardigan, so they would go to Poppit Sands during the summers, and I remember going there as a child with them and playing on the beach there. And Poppit is weird as well in Wales because it has this English name. It's this kind of it's an anachronism in the middle of all this Welshness.
Yeah,
and did you move to West Wales? When did you move to West Wales? Was it prior to 2007?
We moved in 2007.
Right.
Because after my time working on IT, I had these plans to become full-time photographer. Mm-hmm. And so my wife and I thought, right, where can we go somewhere where we can afford a house, afford to raise a family, and be surrounded by something that's inspiring. So we looked in quite a few places, and then we came here and we thought, this is fantastic. I didn't know anything about Poppit at that point. Mm-hmm. So we moved here, and then I started doing the rounds of all the local beaches and trying all the landmarks, like I'm sure virtually every other landscape photographer that comes around does. I got into a gallery in Cardigan. I thought, right, this is great. They started selling my stuff. But the owner of the gallery said, why don't you go to Poppit Sands? So I went to Poppit Sands, and it was just luckily it was an evening when there was a low tide, and it was it was perfect, and I got photographs at that time that I'd never had before, the like of before.
So it's serendipitous.
Absolutely, it's pure chance. It could have been any beach. Yeah. I know that Poppit is a lovely beach, and it's enormous and everything. It's got lots of great features, and it's got free parking, which is really, really important. It is, because I mean, if I think it feels like if I'd have to pay £2 or something for parking every time I'd go there, I would have spent thousands by now, and I might have even thought twice about going out there quite so often. So having free parking was quite a bonus. But there's so many lovely beaches that it could have been any of them. But it's Poppit that I went to. I got those shots, and crumbs, it's such a long time ago now. And it really, it wasn't like a eureka moment or anything. It was just like, right, so I can keep on going back to this place, and it can keep on giving.
Did you initially, when you went there, did you photograph the vista, or was that what pulled you to begin with? Or I mean, how did you discover Poppit, Mike Jackson's Poppit Sands?
Well, the landscape itself, the first few times I went there, probably the first few months I went there, it was standard landscape shots. But then, I was just getting into the idea of the golden hour, and things in the evening look beautiful, and there's something special about the light on the sand and whatnot, and the rays coming through the cloud, and all the standard things that I think most people go through when they start out. And I thought, right, okay, this is fantastic. But then I started slowly to notice that you can only take so many shots of that one particular landscape before you start repeating yourself. And I really liked getting my teeth. When I used to paint, I used to do portraits, and I used to just do hundreds and hundreds of portraits. It's something about me that I find something and I just repeat it and repeat it and repeat it to get into the real nitty gritty of what I'm doing. But I found with the photographing one particular place, I found that it was a bit limiting. I couldn't do it with just as a normal landscape. And I also noticed that the sand, the bottom half of the picture was moving and changing all the time, and the top half was, apart from the sky, it was pretty standard. So I found the camera slowly tilting down, and then I started finding that all my shots were not, well, they are including the sky, but it's all in the water.
Yes, as reflections. Yes.
Yeah, and it's like a gradual movement, and then I probably within a year I was just concentrating on things that were happening on the beach rather than the beach itself.
And of course, your time was limited because you were waiting for low tide. I guess, from my knowledge of Poppit, you have to wait for low tide before you get those wonderful shapes you get in the sand.
Yeah, well, it's I really limited myself to the most basic elements that I could, partly to make it as simple as possible for me, because I found there were so many variables anyway that if I started mucking around with other things like different films or different lenses or different cameras, I wouldn't have this solid core of something to grab hold of. So I kept it to the same film, the same camera, same lens, and the same time of day, it worked really well for me, and I could gauge things and balance them off against each other because I knew that I was using exactly the same things all the way through. But then I found that's good up to a point, but it's also quite limiting up to a point. So I started changing the times of day that I went, because before I could only do low tide, as you said, and in the evening, and that's a pain.
Absolutely.
And I'd be sitting at home.
How many times a month? About 3 or 4 times a month?
Something like that. And I'd be sitting at home so frustrated. And also, when I got there, I would be desperate to get as many rolls done as possible, because I thought, right, this is the only time I got it. And I wasted so much time, and I wasn't relaxed. Not that I really am ever relaxed when I'm there, but I wasn't as relaxed as I should be. I wasn't concentrating as much as I should be. And I'd be dreadfully disappointed if I'd go there and my camera would jam, or it started to rain. It'd be a real punch in the stomach. But so I thought, right, I've got to try other times of day, because there's low tides. If I can find a way of doing it at other times of day, then it opens up Poppit completely to me all through the year. And then going there over and over again at different times of day brought up all sorts of other problems, because there'll be a lot more people on the beach, and there'll be shiny, all the lovely reflections that I liked, they were all disappeared. So, but then I'd started discovering things that I really enjoyed because of those problems.
Yeah, there's one particular shot I like. You've got, I was looking at your website, and there's a lovely shot of those lovely abstract shapes in the sand, and you've got the dog marks going across. And that's so. I mean, because dogs are a nuisance on a beach to photographers sometimes.
They were a nuisance when I started.
Yes,
and I used to hate it, because I'd get everything cute, sort of lined up, and it would be fantastic, and then this dog would run past and start licking me, and but it's one of those things, and it's happened over and over again, where I found that if you come across a problem that is really irritating, it's so much better to be able to get that problem and make it something rather than avoid it.
Absolutely.
So I found that with the dog footprints and human footprints, they were all over the place. I found they make really interesting points of interest, and they can really make a composition, I find, rather than break it. And I quite like the fact when they've broken some of the pretty patterns up. I began to find that the patterns can look a bit too beautiful, if that's the case. But and to have footprints there, and dog footprints, even dogs carrying sticks and dragging them through and making marks in the sand, I found that sort of added a lot to it. So I started getting really fascinated about it. It's almost like Chinese, Japanese painting with these wonderful black marks. If you print them really high contrast, they look almost like writing in the sand. Yeah. And also another major problem I had was glare of the sun in the water. Yeah. If you go midday...
So were you polarising your lens then? Or?
I did at the beginning. At the beginning, I always used a red filter and a polariser. Yeah. But I've ditched both of those. And I found that so many times you just have this sun blasting away at you in the water and you think, oh, my God. But then I started getting into looking at the negative of the prints, and I realised that the sun just looks fantastic in the water when it's a negative. It's this wonderful black dot,
yes,
which looks really spectacular to me, anyway, and looks unreal. So then I realised, well, actually, this thing that could have been a major problem and was a pain in the backside can be sort of changed and made into something that is a feature that makes me excited about it.
Yeah, it's interesting you're talking about Japanese stuff on the ground, because of late. Well, no, not of late, really, but I've got a little obsessed with the beach. Yeah. And I find there's one particular beach I go to, and as the tide recedes, you get the tide and the water makes very thin lines in, and if you get a mixture of black and sand-coloured sand, you get these amazing vistas that happen on the sand. Really? And I've become quite obsessed with them. Yeah. And they look very Japanesey. They are in a kind of Japanese style of mountains and ridges, and you get thin lines of plastic as well. You know, bits of and it is astonishing what you can see beneath your feet.
Yeah, yeah.
And maybe it's a lesson all photographers should learn. They should look beneath their feet.
I think people say that. Say, you know, look at what's at your feet and also look at what's local rather than going very far. I think for me, as well as those things, it's the repetition which is really important. And I think it's some people have the expectation of things coming to them really quickly and being available to them within, you know, they go to a place and they go for a week or they visit it for a week and they kind of expect it to give them something special. And I think you have to be prepared to invest your time and almost pay respect to the place enough. Go and give it enough of your time. And, well, the beach itself doesn't change, obviously. Well, it does. It changes all the time. But it is always going to give you the same beach. What changes is yourself. And that takes a long, long time. It takes years and years, I think. So
you have an emotional investment in your work, then?
I don't know if I'm always wary of emotion. I kind of think I'm always wary of emotion and sentiment. I hate sentimentality in photography, in my photography anyway. I always try and avoid that as much as I can. I find that I have an attachment to it, but not I'd like to go and get married on the beach or something like that. It is very much like a workplace. It's not like a fun place to go to. It's a place that I'm fascinated by. I'm trying to think of a comparison that I could. It's like eating a lovely meal. It's not fun to eat a lovely meal. It's nourishing and it's enjoyable, but you don't say you're having great fun eating it. It's kind of like that. It's like a nourishing experience.
And respect, perhaps, as well.
Yeah, yes. And it feels like I said, it's like I'm investing time into the location, and it's not giving me things back because it's not a physical thing. It can't give me things back. What's happening is my mind is seeing things that I couldn't see, and it kind of twists it and makes it feel like the beach is giving me things, but it isn't giving me things. It's just that I'm seeing more in it.
And over that period of Poppit is a big place.
Yeah.
How confined is your palette or your looking space on Poppit? Or, I mean, are there other areas, you've been there doing it for a long time, are there other areas of Poppit that you want to explore and work with?
There are massive areas that I haven't touched. Where I've been going is very limited. It's usually a bit by where the river touches the Poppit, and also there's a bit far out. It's called the Cardigan Bar, which is right when it's really low tide. But I think I've probably touched about a tenth of the beach, probably less than that. There's a whole side of it that I haven't touched. Once again, I've sort of kind of tried to whittle it down to make it as condensed as possible, because I feel that if I started wandering off into other areas at the moment, it might overcomplicate things for me. And I'm still getting things from the other parts of the beach, or the parts of the beach that I've been visiting for such a long time now, that it amazes me each time I go there. You know, I've been to this place so many times, but the very nature of the beach, the fact it's renewed all the time, it just keeps on giving. So I'm just fascinated how, at the moment, on those same places.
Somebody said, I think somebody said yesterday, they'd like to dive into one of your photographs.
Oh, really? Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I try and when I think of the photographs, I try and think of them as heavy. I think that's probably the best way. I imagine they're kind of heavy to hold, which may sound a bit strange.
No, I understand the concept completely.
Yeah, it's kind of like I don't want them to be light, not light in tone, but that I want them to look like they're almost like carved out of stone a bit. I've never actually thought of diving into them, but it's nice that someone would like to do that.
Yeah, and I think I remarked once, I remember looking at one of when you posted on Twitter, and I thought, this guy's turned the painting up, or turned the painting, see? And turned the photograph upside down. And I think I remarked to you that I thought it was upside down, but it wasn't upside down, it was the right way up. Because you came back to me and said, no, it's not upside down, that's the way it's meant to be.
Oh, right.
And it was kind of, because I think sometimes I like to turn stuff like that upside down and fiddle around with it, because it kind of gives it a totally new dimension. And a friend of mine actually worked a lot, and he turned lots of his photographs upside down. And it's remarkable the way you start to look at things when you're turning them upside down. Anyway, that's just
no, I agree. It's the composition comes through.
Yeah,
and it's the same with painting. It's one of the old tricks you do is you look at the painting in the mirror when you're doing it.
Yeah,
and because your eye becomes very familiar with what you're doing, and you don't necessarily catch what's really going on. But if you turn it upside down, it's just like seeing it for the first time, and if there is something strong there, it really strikes you.
Yeah.
So it's like putting it away for a week and then bringing it out again, and judging a picture by that initial reaction rather than the reaction you've had after looking at it for hours on end.
You've exhibited all over the world. And what sort of reactions do you get to your work?
Really good, generally.
Yeah.
Generally. I get a few people that say, we've seen all this before. You can't please everybody. And it can become, it's quite a common thing, I think, for people to take pictures of ripples in the sand, and black and white ripples in the sand. So you don't get positive all the time. You get lots of lovely comments in visitor books and things. I got one from the Pembrokeshire Coastal Path Centre just recently, because I had an exhibition there, and it was filled with lovely comments. And only one comment said, I came here to see you dance because of my name. So, I usually get quite a few of those, but this time it's only just one of those comments this time. Bless them. I generally good reception. And usually pretty pleased with what people think.
Yes.
But it doesn't, I try not to let that.
It's funny, I hadn't been to Poppit for years and years and years and years. And I was meeting a friend there because he was going to give me a painting, actually. So I met the guy in the car park and he gave me the painting. And I thought, I'll have a wander. So I went down, and it was the tide was coming in. But what fascinated me about the place was the way that the water actually creates. So I was photographing the water, and I found the water and what it does to the sand underneath, and the way the water, especially when light hits it in a particular way, you get these swirls and things happening in water, which I found fascinating, because the only other place I've seen that happen is, believe it or not, in Mumbles.
Oh, really?
Yeah, where you get this really coarse sand. So everything that you look, and when the light hits it in a particular way, you get these swirls and sort of and shapes, geometrical shapes that the water creates with the light, and you get these fascinating sort of jewels happening in pools and stuff.
Yeah.
And it was. So do you look at the water at all? I mean, I know it's part of the photograph, and you like the wetness of the sand. But do you photograph the water? Have you ever thought about photographing the water?
I think I've never actually gone up to the breaking waves.
Right.
But because of the river that runs
Yes.
on the beach,
Yes.
I photograph on the edge quite a bit, and I had thought about the water. If it's there and it crosses my path, and something inside sparks when I look at it, then I'll photograph it. I don't really have any kind of agenda when I go. I just take whatever's there and just hope that I can get into that particular state of mind where I can see properly, and then it all clicks and everything starts happening.
Yes, the photographic muse.
Yeah, it takes a while sometimes. Sometimes it happens straight away. There's no rhyme or reason about it. I quite often find the first shot I take is rubbish, and then it all sort of starts working after that. Sometimes nothing happens at all. Every now and then, sometimes the first shot's the only one that's worth keeping. There's no rule at all. But I'd certainly find that I get into a certain state of mind on the beach when it's almost like tunnel vision. I only realised this a couple of years ago, and it's all this thing about realising what's happening to yourself when you're actually out there taking photographs. You're being self-aware of how you're reacting to it. And I realised that I get this kind of strange tunnel vision, and I get it when I'm in a stressful situation where I kind of channel like that. If I'm in a room full of strangers and I'm in a nervous situation, I don't recognise anybody either side of me. I get this tunnel vision. It's a bit strange, but I also get it when I'm working well on the beach, and it's kind of like you see something, and wherever you look, everything seems to work. Yeah. Whereas if I wasn't thinking that way, then it would be, I'll be groping and looking and setting things up and going, oh no, that's not right. But when I'm in that state of mind, I find it's fantastic. I can move from one spot to another spot to another spot, and all of the compositions seem to naturally fit and slot into the frame of the camera as I put it down, and wallop, great, snap, wallop, great, snap, rather than putting it down, oh no, putting it down, oh no.
Do you, all handheld, or do you do tripod stuff?
It's all tripod. I spent some time doing handheld. I thought, I was trying things out, and I thought, right, handheld would be free, or make me freer, or make it faster. But I found that my focusing wasn't as good when I was having to handhold it. So I found with the tripod, it's obviously steadier, and I could just spend a few seconds more getting the focusing just right.
Yeah.
So I found there's a chunk when I did handheld that just don't look right. So they're kind of like being discarded. So that was about a year or so of my life wasted. And I went back to tripod again.
Right.
And everything seems sort of so much better.
The medium format. Why medium format? What is the je ne sais quoi about medium format?
Well, I started medium format, especially with the Hasselblad, I think, because right at the very, very beginning, I was like, Charlie Waite, and I thought, Charlie Waite, and you see his film with the Hasselblad, and you think it's like that little bit of hero worship that I think a lot of people go through. And then he had this wonderful Hasselblad, and I thought, yeah, that's what I've got to go for. And I got one eventually because they're pretty cheap. And I think it's probably because I started with that Hasselblad, and I what's the point of changing it if you really like it? I think if I tried any other type of camera at Poppit, I would have probably adapted my technique around it, and things probably might have turned out looking differently, but I would have kept on with that particular camera. I mean, I have tried other cameras. I've tried large format cameras, and I tried digital as well, but I couldn't get on with them. And that might be my fault. It might be that I wasn't prepared to invest enough time into trying them out properly. Yeah. But I was greedy for progress. I was greedy to develop. I was greedy to move on. And I found with the Hasselblad, I could go out there and see something new with it. And I knew it back to front. I could operate it with my eyes closed. But then it's taking a great big large format camera out there with the hood and everything, and the wind blowing you over, and it getting into all the sand, getting into all the bits and pieces. I found a couple of times visiting with that thing, and my enthusiasm dampened a little bit. And the Hasselblad's a fantastic thing. It can take a real wallop, and it takes sand. And I've had to replace my tripod 3 times, and I've had to replace my camera bag 3 times because of the salt. But the Hasselblad is still the same camera. I think I changed the back. I've got 2 backs. I've lost 2. Because they broke, but I've still got 2 left, I think, or is it 1? But anyway, the Hasselblad is still
And I bet you like to handle it. They're tactile.
It's lovely, yeah. I used to give it a clean and polish and, show it to my wife and say, look at this lovely camera, isn't it beautiful? But I don't do that anymore, quite so much anymore. Not really. It is a beautiful thing, and I love the fact it's so mechanical, and I love the fact that it is so old and it's still going.
Yes.
And I love the fact that the lens is from the 60s, and basically everything that I've shot on Poppit, its light has reflected off the beach and it's passed through that lens. Yes. I just love the fact that lens has got all that memory wrapped up inside it.
Yes.
But I don't. It's become more of a tool now rather than an object of desire. I don't buy sort of camera magazines. I haven't got like an interest in cameras. That might sound a bit strange, but I don't follow what's happening. But I might do if I come across a work that I want to do that needs a certain type of digital camera that's got a particular feature. Then I probably get a bit obsessed about that, and I'd get obsessed about digital. But I haven't got that yet.
Some would say film is dying. It won't last. Do you think it has longevity still?
I hope so.
Yeah.
It's got something. It's got a sort of a poetic thing about it that I really like. But I think it would be a mistake to say that it is superior to anything else. No. I personally think that digital isn't a fantastic medium. There's loads of other things that are fantastic. And I think film has still got so many possibilities, and there are people doing new things with it all the time. Mm. And it's got this wonderful physical thing where you can actually hold it and adapt it and change it and do all sorts of things with it. Especially if you combine that with the darkroom. Yeah. And people obviously over 100 years have worked on it and done so many wonderful things, but I think it could last a lot longer if they're prepared to keep on making it. And yes. I know they've stopped making the Holga now. Yes. So that's the concerning thing, is that I know that it's almost the Holga brought students into the realm of film and got them interested in it, and I'm just a bit concerned that
sparked off the
yeah.
I mean, without the Holga you wouldn't be
yes.
doing photography, I guess.
Possibly, yeah. So that's a little bit of a worry, that if that's not there, is it like a domino effect? Does everything else tumble and fall?
Yeah.
So I kind of hope that there's still a Diana, I think that's still made.
Yes.
And there's still quite a big interest in plastic cameras and self-made cameras and that kind of thing. So I just hope it stays popular at the root level with students and people interested in that kind of thing, and let's just hope it keeps on going. But if it doesn't, it's not the end. For me personally, I would find another way. I wouldn't stop just because film goes. I would be prepared to invest some more time in another medium out there to get what I wanted to.
Okay. Do you? I mean, 2007 is now 2015. Yeah, it's a long time. One big project like Poppit is a massive project, really. how many? I mean, I know it sounds like a trite question, but how many images have you created in that period?
I have no idea. Absolutely no idea.
Do you go back at all and look at stuff that you've done? Do you go back to your negative archive and look?
Sometimes I do. I've loads. I think is probably the. I mean, when I go out there, I usually take a maximum of 3 rolls of film. Sometimes if I'm really on fire, it's like 5 rolls, but that really happens very rarely. That's a bit, yeah. I haven't even thought about how much money I've spent on film. So I've got no idea. But I know because I scan everything into Lightroom, just as it like so I scan things into Lightroom and I just keep it as a catalogue in Lightroom. That I've got about 400, 500 ones that I'm really pleased with. That when I'm prepared to print and get out there. But how much of a percentage that is, I don't know.
Do you when you've been out on a shoot to Poppit, or do you come back and immediately process the film, or do you leave it for a while?
I don't have much choice. If I got about 2 or 3 rolls, I only do one at a time, and it's quite nice. I won't do it immediately, but I'll do the first one within a few days, hopefully, and then by the time I get to the 3rd roll, I'll just be developing it, and then I'll just be ready to go out again. So it kind of means that I've always got an interest. Something's happening on Poppit, whether I'm there or not. I'm either out there or I'm working on the film. I think if I try and develop them all in one go, that would leave me too big a chunk of time before I could get out there again.
Right.
So
jumping to darkroom. I used to spend hours in the darkroom overnight in darkroom, just experimenting with stuff. So how long do you spend in a darkroom?
Well, every day. It's not just a darkroom for me. It's like a place I can just shut the door.
It's your shed, really.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a man cave type thing. Yeah. I can do anything I want in there. And that's really important for me, because when I'm mucking around and doing stuff with any of the other work that I do, I do sort of tend to try ridiculous things, or anything that pops into my mind. So, I mean, I'm in there from 9 till 4:30 every weekday. And if I get in at the weekend as well, I'll get in there. But that's not always with chemicals. And that could be sometimes just sitting there and thinking about stuff and trying to figure out why on earth something went wrong, or what should I do with this particular print.
Do you keep notes of everything you do?
No, I don't. Or maybe I should, but I tend to remember everything. I was asked this question recently. I can't remember who by, but I generally in life I'm useless with things. I can't remember. If you asked me the villages around where I live, I couldn't tell you. And people's names I'm awful with as well. But when it comes to things to do with darkroom work and times and chemical combinations and things, I can leave it for a month or so and then come back and jump straight in there. And for some reason, it sort of clicks back again. And I kind of think that I kind of prioritise things that are important to me in my mind. And those things that happen in my darkroom are quite important.
But the printing process is an important aspect of your work. I mean, silver gelatin prints, it's, big prints.
Then
No.
I'm not a good printer at the best of times. I can print just well enough to get what I want. Okay. I could never print someone else's work, so I wouldn't class myself as a good printer at all, apart from I can print my work to give my results that I want.
Really? Because I would assume that you were a very, very, very good printer.
No, if you gave me a negative of yours, I wouldn't have an idea what to do with it. I would struggle. But I found that I seem to do what I need to do to get the results that I want, and anything else, to learn anything else, would be too much for me, or it would be distracting from my sort of what I want to do. Okay. So
And what sort of manipulation do you do? Do you do any manipulation to the negs at all? Do you dodge and burn?
Print and all that. That's that, and I do dodging and burning.
Yeah.
But I'm not an expert in any way. what I do is I just do what I do to get what I want. And like I said, if someone asked me, or if someone came to me and asked me to print their wedding or anything like that, I would be so scared I just wouldn't be able to.
Do you? Would you give your negs to somebody else to print?
Yeah, I've given to Andrew Sanderson. He's done brilliant work. He's printed a few of, or he does a few of mine, which he's done an excellent job, better than I would have done. And yes, I did. When I was in London, I gave a lot of my negatives to a printer there who's printed for Linda McCartney and loads of people, and for big galleries there, and he printed them for me as well. So yeah, I give them out sometimes.
So did you learn anything from their processes that you?
No, I saw them do well, I didn't see Andrew do his work, and
right.
This other chap, he didn't. I wasn't around when he did his, but I came to the conclusion after seeing the work that I want to print my own work. Andrew's prints is something different, but my other work, I like to do it. It's like the best way to describe it, it's like writing a song and singing it yourself rather than writing a song and giving someone else to sing for you.
Yes.
You want to be able to do it, and I get such a sense of satisfaction looking at a print, knowing that I've done it right from beginning to end, even though it might have taken me ages and I might have made so many mistakes to get there. Mm-hmm. At least it's like a honest from me. Yeah, if that makes sense.
It does, very much so. Intrigued. I don't know if you've stopped doing that, but I'm intrigued with the work that you do in the tank and the stones and the islands and the little seagulls.
Little seagulls. Those are breadcrumbs.
Yeah. But I'm intrigued by that because it's very, very inventive, and it's also. You started telling stories when you were showing them first on Twitter. I'm sure you started to tell little stories,
I did, yeah.
And you've stopped doing that.
I have.
Why?
Well, it's. I used to create these things, and I used to love naming them because I used to name them after people that helped me and it's such a nice thing to be able to do, to say, I'm going to name this print after you, and it's like you're naming a rock structure or a cliff after someone, and people like it, and yeah, it's really nice. And I found that I was thinking, because it's all based around children and how children think.
Because that's the way the whole thing started with it. It was listening to your kids, I guess.
It was, yeah. Listening to my kids on the beach and them talking about things, and also that married up with a kind of blending in from ideas from Poppit Sands, and a blending in from pure chance, me walking up. There's a lane up close by called Badger Lane that's full of loads of rocks, and I've said it in my films and whatever. Yeah. But it's a mixture of all these things all came together, and it's one of those things where just by pure chance everything happens together, and it's down to the kids talking to you and opening your eyes up and them seeing the world in that particular way. And I thought, well, great, okay, I'm producing these images, why don't I start a pretend Twitter feed? Pretending that. So I found a picture of my great grandfather's old photo, and I put that up, and I made up some name, some voyage, and I started doing that, and I loved doing it, but then I found it started getting a bit, I took up too much of my time, and it wasn't that many people weren't interested. I wasn't getting much interest back.
I was fascinated by it. I thought it was brilliant.
See, if I'd known that, I would have kept on going. But it just, I didn't get very much, and I did it for quite a while, and then it kind of just like, I wanted to do it every day type thing, and it just got, and then it started just getting a bit more, and I had to keep on thinking of stories, and I'd love to be able to put it into a book as like a child's book or something, like some kind of adventure book. And I've written to people and whatever, but as usual, it's like, no, thank you very much. So that kind of, it's a shame. It kind of it sort of dwindled away. That
So How long did it take you to work out what technique you were going to use to make
Ages.
it?
Yeah, ages. It started off with ideas from Poppit and the negative. Because I think I'm becoming slowly of the mind that I personally don't have individual projects. I find that everything all blends and melds into one. If you see the Poppit work and you see the child's landscape work, what you don't see is all the blending in that the two do from Poppit that sort of morphed into becoming the child's landscape. And I've got loads of photos of abstractions and Poppit abstractions mixed with other negatives and all sorts of strange things. And then suddenly I started taking pictures of the rocks and taking drawing at on the beaches and around the cliffs. And it does take, you never really know which direction it's going to go. You just kind of do what it feels right, and you sort of follow your intuition. And so it does take a while, but I wouldn't say it's a rule. I wouldn't say, it's going to only be a good idea if it takes you months to develop it. It's just one of those things that either happens or it doesn't.
Yeah. I read somewhere that you use bread.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So where did that come from?
I was, I think that was a mistake. I think what happened was I was putting the rocks into the fish tank, and they were still covered in dirt, and the dirt was coming off and making these patterns in the water. And then I thought, oh, this is I was taking these long exposure shots of these rocks, and this dirt was floating around, and it was making these wonderful patterns. I thought that looks really good, but the problem was it was making the water really murky, and the camera wouldn't focus properly on the rock, and it was difficult to see it, and it blurred it. And I thought, how can I get a similar effect but keep the water clear? And breadcrumbs are pretty good. If they get them small enough, they hang around in the water for quite a while before they bob to the surface, so that they just seem to fit the bill. So, but I can't think of anything else I could have used. Something that floats in water that doesn't sink. I can't think. I mean, sugar would dissolve, wouldn't it? And breadcrumbs, any other biscuit crumbs would sink, but breadcrumbs keeps it. Yeah. Anyway.
So, do you light it at all?
Do
you light the tank at all? Or
No. I've just got an overhead light, and that's just lit that way. But I mean, a lot of the shapes and the lights are made by me moving around. Right. Because I had initially a problem where I'll be sitting there in front of the fish tank, and there'll be the rock in the fish tank, and I'll be taking the long exposure photo, and I'll get it back, and there'll be a great big reflection of my face staring back at me off the side of the fish tank. But then I noticed that if I moved around, it obviously would be blurred, and you would get different tones. And I realised that I could actually make the shapes of the clouds and whatever just by me moving around. So when you look at those photos, the dark patches are nearly always me, depending on what colour shirt I've got, and whether it's a light shirt or dark shirt, and whether it can see my bookcase in the background and all this. It all depends how the photo comes out. It looks a bit strange, I have to say. Not, imagine you sitting in me sort of flapping my arms around. It's just
what fascinates me about them is they look vast, vast, crazy places.
That's rock for you. It's amazing. It's the rock around here. Yeah. It's the same properties. A little piece of rock that size of my hand, has the same properties as a rock on Khyber Bay, for example. Yeah. It looks the same thing, and it is a bit of, you have to make that switch away from reality. I've just kind of said it before, but you can't. When you look at something like that, you can't expect it to be real. You have to use your imagination the same way a child would. And once you do, I find personally, once you do start to imagine it the way a child would, it makes it more real for me. I find I can almost smell the sea, and you can hear the seagulls. You're not copying nature, you're interpreting nature, you're changing it a bit and doing things, but it's not being reliant on the outside world. You're making up your
and you've moved into a different area with your latest work. I'm working exclusively and making images in the darkroom and abstraction. But again, as you say, all related to Poppit. It's this linear thing going through the whole.
There is. I would love to be able to get some kind of video of a timeline of all the photographs and how they morph into each other, and all the ones in between each group of photographs, so you could see how all the changes made. But the Luminograms that I do now, I started making them. I started fiddling around with underwater abstracts when I was making my child's landscape images, and it started changing and warping and twisting, and then I started taking pictures of the sun, some photographs, and I used to keep them on 35mm film, and that kind of big circle thing. I started getting those images and printing them and adapting them and changing them, and through the printing process and messing around and creative play, I ended up with loads of bits of photo paper, like test strips that I wouldn't use, and so I started just sort of playing around with ideas that I'd got from a child's landscape and Poppit, and it kind of morphed and changed and warped and started giving me results, and it comes back down to being aware of how you feel when you strike gold, or your own personal gold, and knowing that that excites me, and being able to really focus on that and move away from everything else and understand why you like that particular thing. It's kind of like if imagine you're taking you see candles, or for example, I was thinking about this the other day, and the best way to describe it, but if you say you see a candle and you think, oh, that's beautiful, the candle, I love the look of that's I'll start taking photos of that and the flame and everything. You start taking photos of candles, and then you suddenly realise after taking the photos that it's not actually the candle itself that you love the look of, it's the flame. So you start taking more interesting photographs of the flame. Yes. And then you think, oh, wait a minute, it's the base of the flame that's the bit that's really interesting me. You start looking at the abstract images, and then you think, well, hang on a minute, it's actually the shadow on the wall behind the flame that looks beautiful. So then you move your interest to the shadow on the wall, and you see the textures in the walls, and then you think, wow, that's beautiful, the shadow of the flame. And then you see the shadow of the smoke coming off the flame, and you think that's wonderful. And then you think, well, hang on a minute, those shadows look beautiful. I wonder if I could get the shadows of other things that would interest me. So you start looking at shadows, maybe shadows of people or shadows of heads. And then it's that kind of thinking and moving from one thing. You go from photographing a candle to ending up photographing shadows of people's faces. So it's kind of like seeing something that you feel really strongly excited about, and understanding what that thing is that you feel excited about it, and really studying it, and then being prepared to change completely what you thought you were taking a photograph of, because you've discovered something else that was the real reason why you were photographing.
But that's very brave, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose you have to be prepared to move and change and not just stick with something. And I think that's a really important aspect for me anyway. It's just growing and developing, and not staying in one place.
Yeah, so do you think there's an inertia then in landscape photography, that it's become this chocolate boxy type way of looking at the world? And especially today, I noticed that, you can go to Google Plus and you see all this HDR stuff going on, and that sort of doesn't excite me at all. But do you think that people aren't looking the way they should?
Well, I think everyone does it for different reasons, and I think if someone wants to take landscape for themselves because they love the look of HDR, they love these wonderful, colourful landscapes, then who am I to say they shouldn't be doing it? Because I think a lot of people do photography for fun. It's not their main passion in life. They work 9 to 5 and they want to do it to relax. I wouldn't call landscape photography relaxing at all. No. But to so many people, it is this fun thing. It's the people who say that they have creative vision. There's so many professionals out there that talk about their creative vision, where in fact, all they're doing is producing the same as everybody else. But I understand that a lot of people have to make their living or do make their living out of photography. And so they I think they use the creative vision headline as some way of getting customers or getting people onto a workshop. But there are only a few I can think of who do run workshops and who make their living that do have this creative vision. But I was thinking about that as well recently, and I was thinking the problem is that people that run workshops can't follow their creative vision as freely as I expect they would love to, because they have to provide inspiration and they have to start people off at a base level. And if they go a bit strange or a bit obscure, then for me that would be bringing new people in at a certain level where they should be starting at the base level and working their way up.
Yeah.
And I think another analogy I find is that I think workshop leaders, I think they do a really good, and teachers, they do a really good job of getting people initially interested and passionate about photography. But I think the problem is they were like, I was thinking about this, they're like those planes that tug hang gliders. They pull them up and they tug them with lots of effort and they get them up into the air, and then they put it and then they show them everything, and it's fantastic. But what they don't do is they don't let them go. What they should do is they get them up there, they give them all this teaching and get them really excited and passionate about it, and then they should, either the hang glider person should unattach themselves, or the hang glider tug plane should say, right, off you go. But they don't, and they follow them, and the hang glider follows the teacher everywhere they go, and they stay following the teacher. And the teacher doesn't get a chance to go off and go and explore other exciting avenues because they're too busy going down, landing and putting the next one up and going doing the usual route. Yeah. So it has to be, I think some teachers do it. They have to take them up there, get them passionate, but then say, right, whatever you do something else other than what I'm doing, or do something else that I haven't seen anybody else do. Or maybe they could do a course where it starts off with them getting inspired by the landscape and making the end project being, I want you to produce a group of photographs that I've never seen the like of before. And that would be, I think that would be wonderful for the students, because it's kind of like getting it's opening them up to be able to glide off and find new areas.